Welcome back, Rediscovery viewers. Today, yet again, we're talking to Yitzy. Yitzy, welcome to the studio. We're discussing legal topics. This is for tech folks only. If you have legal background, these videos are not for you. So let's go right into it. And topic for today is privilege. We heard this word a million times, privilege this, privilege that. What does it mean?
Privilege is a tricky topic, actually, because what constitutes privilege? So let's take, for example, I'm an attorney,
Okay.
I'm in practice. You come to me, you say, Yitzy, I have this great idea that I've developed some software, and I have a patent background, and you start talking to me about the patents. But you're not coming to me in the capacity of an attorney, you're talking to me as your coworker. That
Right.
wouldn't be privileged, even though I'm an attorney. If, however, you come, Yitzy, I know you have a patent background, could you give me some legal input over here, things, then you'd be asking me basically for legal advice, assuming I accept it.
Yes.
I can be acting in a capacity as a lawyer. So the idea of privilege is basically there's a communication, there's different elements, depending on where you look, how many elements there are, but the idea is that it's a communication where I'm seeking legal advice. It can't just be like, a lot of times, especially when we deal with larger clients, where you have in-house counsel
Yes.
that act as basically a business person and the counsel. A lot of times they're dealing with business questions that aren't really legal, but people will try to say, oh, he's a lawyer, so we'll make it privilege.
Right. So that's what interesting thing that you said, if you accept it. So let's say if I'm in trouble and I ask my attorney for help, or let's say I ask an attorney for help and they tell me something, but they may not have accepted to represent me.
So accepted might have been the wrong term. Usually that's acting because you usually have some type of relationship that might get a little trickier, but if they're giving you in the capacity of a legal advice, that would
Yes.
probably be considered
That would be
privileged.
considered privilege.
Because they're giving it to you in a legal capacity. I'm saying they may say, okay, this is what I recommend, but I'm not taking on this case.
Right.
But they're still acting as a legal
So
relationship.
that would
for
still
this.
be considered.
I
Okay.
would say that's considered privilege, yes. And let me bring up two terms. You've heard of attorney-client privilege, and then you've heard
Yes.
work product. And you kind of see it in the relativity template. Those are pretty much the two choices. What's the distinction between them?
I have no idea. I'm looking.
Does it matter to you?
Right.
Because-
So as a tech person, to me, it doesn't matter much.
Right.
We work, I work in a responsive way. Clients send us a request and we do it for them. So it doesn't matter to a technical person, but from perspective of understanding, I very much would like to know.
So attorney-client communication is generally, like we just said, the case where you communicate with the client.
Yes.
Now, and that can get broader in certain senses if let's say, I ask the legal in-house counsel for what's our policy as far as how we handle harassment, for example. And then I send around the input that he says about how harassment, what constitutes harassment input, and a legal memo and pass it around internally to the company. That would probably still be privileged because it's being passed around as legal. It's attorney-client communication per se. So that's a little broader there. Normally it's between me and the attorney. It could be there. But attorney-client communication is broken if, let's say, you call me in and say, my buddy John has a problem and we want to ask your legal advice over here. And it's just John's question, you have nothing to do with it because there's a third party here, you're breaking privilege. Now in-house, because he's acting for the company, it's a little different.
So that information would not be privileged regards whether me or the person on whose behalf I'm asking the question.
There are exceptions.
Right.
I'm giving broad strokes over here.
Okay.
There are exceptions, but since you're not necessarily, if you guys are like co-defendants and you're asking me to represent you both,
Yes.
let's just say, then obviously it would be. And there's other scenarios where it could be. But oftentimes what happens is if somebody seeks legal advice and they let somebody else in that's just not related, I mean, spouse might be different depending on the circumstance.
Spouse, yeah.
But if you just have a buddy coming there and you're the one asking legal and you say, okay, I'm asking my lawyer a question, I want, let's just stop in here, and he listens in, technically that could break the privilege.
Got it.
Because the privilege is supposed to be a communication with the attorney. It doesn't apply if my paralegal's in the office, because my paralegal is my attorney or my co-counsel. We have to understand that it's basically when I'm working as an attorney group. So that's attorney-client privilege. It's basically a communication when I'm seeking legal advice. Now, work product, which is something that comes up a lot. And I'm not going to get into all the details because work product is there, but it's basically in preparation of litigation. So you're not a lawyer. The lawyer calls you up and says, prepare these documents for me. You know, I want you to prepare, you know, something there, prepare certain metadata for me, whatever it may be. You're acting in the capacity, you're preparing it at the direction of the attorney.
Right.
So what steps you take may be privileged because of work product. Now, you know, this may come up in the context of, let's say, where we're working through an assisted review project where they're instructing us how they want to run things. Technically, that could be privileged. However, because it's work product, but you know, it may be raised because there might be deficiencies. So work product doesn't have the same protection, but it's basically in anticipation of litigation. So people are preparing under the direction of the attorneys or in preparation for the litigation. It gets a certain type of protection, but it's not the same level as attorney-client
And what gets the protection are the instructions that are being sent over, not the documents themselves.
The documents themselves, I mean, you're usually preparing them, so you're just producing them. But if the instructions have specifically instructions of, let's say, clearing specific types of metadata, and there's a written instructions on how to do it, that could be that can constitute privilege.
So those are those instructions.
Because you're preparing. I mean, that's not necessarily a great example, but you know, putting together. Let's put it this way. Let's say we have a harassment claim, right? So the company's had a few of these cases, and because to make an offer, right, he instructs somebody who's not an attorney, could be paralegal, could be somebody internally, maybe the client. I asked them to prepare the numbers from the previous settlement offers. And so I can have a better sense. So that preparation and that stuff, technically all those numbers are not privileged, right? But the preparation, those numbers may be privileged because I asked them to prepare it and compile it for me because I want to be able to have a strategy for making a settlement offer.
Got it.
So it's in anticipation of litigation. I mean, that's a settlement, so maybe a bad example, but that's the point.
The second place where we hear privilege is privilege logs. And that's something we generate for cases. Often, sometimes we create saved searches, we create views. Sometimes clients export priv logs out to Excel. But what are the privilege logs? So what do they do?
So privilege log is more, I wouldn't say it's a recent phenomenon. It's in the federal rules. I think it's 26B, 5B. I have to double check the exact thing codified in the federal rules of civil procedure, and obviously everything's state rules. But the idea is that when I make an assertion of privilege on a certain communication, and it comes up more in an electronic context than before, because before I had paper documents, if it's privileged, I just don't produce it. Like, I mean, maybe I have to protect it because I say I have certain documents I'm asserting it's privileged. But you have to explain why it's privileged. And the truth is, while people like to say litigation is a straightforward process, and people should be, I don't mean straightforward, I mean honest, and that there's games being played. Let's face it, just reality. And what people try to hide things on privilege logs, asserting it's privilege, knowing that it's there. They may not produce it all together, but they can come back. But at least this way, if it's on the privilege log, they have it in the record. I mean, there could be a variety of reasons.
And the privilege log tells you what you withheld from production.
You basically gave a brief description. Now, people want to be careful about that because you don't want to give away the communication because then you might tip your hand because the other person may be able to read into it and say, hey.
So you have to be very careful as to how you
People are careful about how they describe things, but you also don't want to be too not descriptive enough because then they'll be like, well, we can't figure out.
Yeah, we need more information about
this.
Right,
and they keep on doing this.
So they'll challenge you.
Right, and they also may have, it could come up, they have an in-camera review. Like if they think that your privilege log is full of holes and is baloney, they may say, okay, we want to have the judge take a look at some of these documents to determine if it's privileged. And people oftentimes, that's the first place they're going to look at because people tend to think that you're hiding the ball on the privilege log. Like you're hiding like critical documents under the assertion that it's privileged, even though that could be important to my case. So the privilege log is supposed to be give a description of the document. Now there's distinctions between, normally we do it out of relativity, for example. We have each document is aligned with the metadata fields, and then you have description of the document and the assertion of privilege, either attorney-client communication work product, and those things may be those
the reasons for withheld.
Right. And then you also have the description of what the document's about. So now that's what we usually provide in a log. But there are ways that I can broad strokes that put like, especially in New York State, they have a rule, they have a preference for it. I can just take a bunch of documents and say it fits into one category and just have one description as opposed to each single document.
Right.
The idea is because privileged review is one of the most expensive parts of review.
Yes.
So that's generally what a privilege log is, and that's where it is. And that's why people are very sensitive to privilege, because you don't want it getting out in this litigation because you don't want to waive it for other matters. Maybe in this case it doesn't really matter if they see my privileged communication about some real estate deal that I had over there, but it might matter to somebody else. So that's why we have clawback agreements and we have protective orders and things like that to keep it in place. So it's limited more, clawbacks more. So the waiver of privilege is only, is not for other cases, and that's why privilege is basically privilege and why it's important, I think.
All right, thank you, Yitzy. Guys, thank you for watching. If you have any questions for Yitzy, or if you have any more words or legal tech terms that you want to explain, put them in the comment section below and we'll get to them on a follow-up videos. In the meantime, don't forget to follow vDiscovery on social media networks listed on your screen. And for previous videos, check us out on YouTube. Thank you for watching.